Welcome to the second of 3 videos exploring the features of Microsoft Word. In the first video, I introduced the idea of text and paragraph formatting. Recall that text formatting applies to individual characters. You have to select the characters before applying the command. With paragraph commands, you only need to set the insertion point inside the paragraph before specifying the command. The command will affect all the words in the paragraph. If you want a paragraph command to apply to more than one paragraph, simply select at least one character from each paragraph that you would like the command to apply to. Now that you're up to speed, let's go into more detail on text and paragraph formatting. I'll start with text formatting. Text formatting affects the appearance of text. The 3 main attributes of text are typeface, style, and size. Typeface refers to the look of the characters. Some of the more popular typefaces are Arial, Times New Roman, and Courier. Notice the live preview as I select different typefaces. You should know that typefaces are broadly classified into 2 groups: serif typefaces and sans serif typefaces. Serifs are the thin lines that you see at the end of characters. Sans means without. So sans serif fonts are fonts without the thin lines. For example, as I switch between Times New Roman, which is a serif font, and Arial, which is a sans serif font, you can see the serifs appear and disappear at the edges of the character. As a general rule of thumb, most print publishers use sans serif fonts for titles and serif fonts for the main body of the text. This is the convention that I'm following in the document that you're looking at now. What works for print publishers doesn't necessarily transfer to the online world, though. Most of the content you read from a computer screen is presented with a sans serif font. You should also be aware that fonts have personality. They convey mood. For example, you probably don't want to design your resume with a comic font, unless I suppose you're applying for a whimsical job, then it might be appropriate. But in all your writing, the typeface that you use should reinforce the message of your text without being a distraction. Typeface is one attribute of text. The other 2 main attributes of text are style and size. Style includes accoutrements such as bold, underline, and italic. Size is the size of the characters in points. There are approximately 72 points in an inch. So if you used a 72-point font, the characters on your paper would be about an inch high. Applying text formatting commands is easy. You have 3 options. After selecting the text, you can A, adjust the text formatting using this mini toolbar that pops up. B, you can use the font group of commands on the Home tab. Or C, you can use the font dialog box. To open the font dialog box, click on the dialog box launcher button at the bottom right-hand corner of the font group. Notice it has all the options available from the toolbar, plus some additional features such as strike-through, superscript, and subscript. Let's do an example. I'll use the font dialog box to make the 2 in this chemical formula a subscript. Another useful text formatting feature is highlighting. You can use highlighting to emphasize particular passages of text. The 2 options for highlighting are, first, you can select the text and then use this highlight command, or you can toggle the highlighter using the same button, and now you can click and drag over whatever text you want to highlight. Note, highlighting changes the color of the background of the text. It doesn't change the color of the text. There's a different command for changing the color of the text, and that is this font color button. Clicking on the font color button changes the color of the font to whatever color was showing on the button when you clicked it. The drop-down next to the button can be used to select a different color. That's all I wanted to say about text formatting. Let's explore paragraph formatting now. Again, paragraph formatting commands apply to all the words in a paragraph. In word processing, the term paragraph has a very specific meaning. When you press enter, you create a new paragraph. In other words, pressing the enter key marks the end of one paragraph and the beginning of another. If you want to be sure where one paragraph ends and the next begins, I recommend turning on View Hidden Symbols. Recall that this is controlled by this button on the Home tab. Oh, it's a good thing I checked, because it appears this third paragraph is really 4 separate paragraphs. Someone's pressed the return key at the end of each line. I want these 3 lines to be treated as one paragraph, so I'm going to delete these first 3 return characters that were added. Now that I have that fixed, let's experiment with different paragraph commands. Paragraph commands are contained in the paragraph group off the Home tab. You can also specify paragraph commands using the paragraph dialog box. Let's take a look at some of the more common paragraph commands. First, I'm going to demonstrate paragraph alignment. I'm going to select this third paragraph here. Well, it looks like the alignment is left justified. You can see the characters on the left are flush with the left margin. Another alignment option is right justified. This aligns the characters to the right margin. Yet another option is justified. I'm going to select more than one paragraph so that you can clearly see the effects of making paragraphs justified. Notice, justified makes both the left and the right side of the paragraphs flush with the margins. Books and newspapers often use the justified alignment. The next paragraph formatting command I'm going to discuss is line spacing. Line spacing is the amount of space between the lines within a paragraph. You can specify line spacing from the ribbon using this icon. It looks like the current line spacing of this paragraph is single-spaced or 1.0. I can change that to double-spaced or 2.0. I can also change it to 1.5 spaces. As I mentioned before, paragraph commands are also available from the paragraph dialog box. To open the paragraph dialog box, select the dialog box launcher in the lower right-hand corner of the paragraph group. Notice you can specify line spacing commands from here, and there are a few additional line spacing options not available from the ribbon. I'll change the line spacing back to single-spaced. In addition to line spacing, you can also control the space before or after a paragraph. This is often used to clearly distinguish one paragraph from another. Well, it looks like the spacing after the second paragraph is 12. Let's check the spacing before the third paragraph. Well, it looks like that is 0. Note the actual space between the two paragraphs will be the maximum of both values, in this case 12. The values aren't added. For example, if I change the spacing before the third paragraph to 6, we don't see any changes. Remember, the space after the second paragraph was 12. However, if I change the space before this third paragraph to 18, you'll notice the extra space between the paragraphs, because 18 is greater than 12. Next up, paragraph indents. If you don't specify paragraph indents, the text in the paragraph stretches between the left and the right margins. Let's modify the indentation for this paragraph. In the paragraph dialog box, you can see a place here to specify a left and a right indentation. I'll set both at 0.5. Notice the paragraph dialog box also has a preview window, which gives you some idea what effect your command will have on the selected paragraph. Notice how the left and the right indent applies to all the lines in the paragraph. Also notice the change in position of the handles on the ruler. You can control paragraph indents through the paragraph dialog box like we just did, or you can use these handles on the ruler. Here, I'll change the indents back to 0 using the handles. I'm going to reopen the paragraph dialog box just to verify the change that I made through the handles. Incidentally, if you don't see the ruler displayed, you can make it visible by going to the View tab and selecting Ruler. Indents apply to all the lines in a paragraph. There's a separate option for specifying indentation just for the first line. First line indent is sometimes used to signal the start of a new paragraph. Here, I'll set the first line indent of this paragraph to 0.5. I'm going to undo that change in order to demonstrate another special indent, which is hanging indent. Hanging indent indents all the lines after the first line. Hanging indents are often used in lists and bibliographies. First line indent and hanging indent can also be controlled using the handles on the ruler. This bottom wedge controls the hanging indent. The top wedge controls the first line indent. This box controls the left indent. And, as you might have guessed, this right handle controls the right indent. Now I'm going to discuss the very serious topic of widows and orphans. A widow is when the last line of a paragraph appears by itself at the top of a page. An orphan is when the first line of a paragraph appears by itself at the bottom of a page. You can prevent widows and orphans by selecting the paragraph that you want to affect and going to the paragraph dialog box and selecting the line and page breaks tab and checking widow orphan control. Notice it has eliminated the widow by moving the first line to the next page. We can fix the problem with orphans by using the same command. Notice that removing the widow created another problem, and that is the title of our paragraph is all by itself. We can fix this with another pagination command, and that is keep with next. I'm going to select the paragraph with the title, go back to the dialog box, and specify keep with next. Sometimes you want to go beyond just eliminating widows and orphans and have all lines of a paragraph appear on the same page. To effect this, select the paragraph and then specify the pagination option, keep lines together. The final pagination command I want to mention is page break before. If you want a paragraph to always begin on a new page, select the paragraph and then specify the pagination option, page break before. Let's move on to paragraph borders and shading. If you want a paragraph to stand out, consider putting a border around it or giving it a certain background color. You can make simple border and shading adjustments from the ribbon. To illustrate, I'll add borders and shading to this paragraph. For more nuanced changes, select the paragraph and then go to the Borders and Shading dialog box. Notice that borders are on one tab and shading is on another. Under the Border tab, there are predefined options such as box and shadow. If you just want a box around a paragraph, the easiest solution is probably to just select box right here. If you want something more custom, you can also customize the border by selecting Custom and specifying the border using the options in this middle and third column. To create a custom border, you would first select a style, a color, and a width for the border, and then use the preview window on the right to specify which sides will be set according to the settings that you just selected. Next up, tabs. Tabs are used to align text. Tabs are often used to create columns of data. When you press the tab key, it will add a tab character to your document that aligns with the next tab stop that's been set. Or if there aren't any tab stops set, it will take you to the next default tab stop. Well, that was quite a bit. Let me demonstrate what I mean. I'll add a tab stop about 4 inches in. Now when I press the tab key, it will move the text to this tab stop that I just set. Now I'm going to remove the tab stop and the tab character that I added to the document so I can demonstrate default tab stops. If there aren't any tab stops defined on the ruler, pressing the tab key takes you to the next default tab stop. There are default tab stops every ½ inch. Let me demonstrate. I'm pressing the tab key 3 times. Since there aren't any specific tab stops defined, each time I press the tab key, it moves the text to the next default tab stop, which is every ½ inch. Tabs are invisible in your document, so you might want to show hidden characters when working with tabs. Doing so clearly shows the 3 tab characters that I added to this document. Note, when working with tabs, there's 2 distinct concepts here. There are tab stops, which you add to the ruler by clicking on the ruler, and then there are tab characters, which you add to your document by pressing the tab key. Here I have 3 tab characters in my document, and no tab stops on the ruler. Since there's no tab stops on the ruler, the tab characters in my document line up with the default tab stops on the ruler. I want to say a little bit more about adding tab stops to the ruler. Tab stops are associated with a paragraph. So to add a tab stop, you first want to select the paragraph where you want to insert the tab, and then select the type of tab from the ruler. You can select the type of tab by clicking on the tab button at the left here to cycle through the different tab options, and I'll discuss the different type of tab options shortly. For the current example, I'm going to add a left tab to the center of the document. Now, pressing the tab key aligns the text with this tab that I just inserted. And note, once set, you can reposition a tab by dragging it left or right. And as you saw earlier, dragging down removes the tab. Notice that I just removed the tab stop that I added to the ruler. The tab character that I added to the document is still there. And since there's no tab stops on the ruler, it defaulted to a ½ inch, which is the default tab stop. I'm going to use the backspace key now to remove the tab character from the document. I have been using left aligned tabs. There are also center aligned tabs and right aligned tabs. I'm going to add a left tab stop, a right tab stop, and a center tab stop. I'm going to go back to the document to insert tabs to align text with these 3 different tab stops. A left tab means that the text associated with the tab is left aligned. A right tab means that the text will be right aligned. And a center tab means that the text will be centered around the tab. Notice as I add more text, the text associated with the tab remains centered around the tab. Notice also, as I mentioned before, tabs are specified by paragraph. When I select a different paragraph, you don't see the tab stops that I just added. You can also control tab stops from the tab dialog box. It contains a few extra options not available from the ruler. Now I'm going to insert a right tab and edit it from the tab dialog box. To open the tab dialog box, select the paragraph with the tabs you want to edit, and open the paragraph dialog box and select the tabs button. This brings up the tab dialog box. You can see the right tab stop I just added. Let's add a leading character for this tab so it'll be easier for your eyes to scan across from the title to the page number. Notice that as I change the length of the contents that are being right aligned, the leading characters adjust accordingly. Next up, an easy topic: bulleted and numbered lists. Lists help you organize and summarize information. There are several ways to create a list. If you already have the data in your document, you can select the paragraphs with the data, and then select the bullet or number icon in the paragraph group on the Home tab. Notice also that you can choose a different bullet style or number style by selecting the pull down next to the bullet or list icons. As a side note, you want to use numbered list when there's a natural sequence to the items. If there's no natural sequence to the items, use a bulleted list. To end a list, press Enter twice. If you have text, or I guess I should say paragraphs, between list items, you can elect to continue the numbering of a previous list. To do so, right-click and select Continue Numbering. Note right-click also gives you the option of restarting the numbering if that's what's needed. The real advantage of using lists comes when you need to change the number of items in the list. Notice how the list elements are renumbered automatically. The final topic in this video is about formatting text into multiple columns. Text formatted into multiple columns is easy to read because the distance your eyes have to scan to get to the start of the line is shorter. The command for creating multiple columns is located off the Page Layout tab in the Page Setup group. Let's jump right in and see what happens when I try to format this text into 2 columns. Oops, that's not quite what I wanted. It's formatted the whole document into 2 columns. I wanted the title to be centered around the 2 columns. I'm going to undo that command. I'll go back to the Page Layout tab, and this time, rather than select 2 columns from the drop-down, I'm going to open the Columns dialog box. Notice that the Columns dialog box allows additional options not available from the icon on the ribbon. For example, you can control the width of the columns, you can put a line between the columns, and there's some other options here. Oh, I think I see why my first attempt wasn't successful. It looks like the default is to format the whole document into 2 columns. Another option is this point forward. I'm going to go back to the document and make sure the insertion point is at the start of the text. Now let's see what happens when I format from this point forward. Well, that looks better. The title is in 1 column, and the text looks to be formatted into 2 columns. But the text isn't balanced between the 2 columns. All the text is here on the left. At this point, it'll be a lot easier to see what's wrong if I turn on hidden characters. Columns use multiple sections, and it's not always clear where one section ends and another begins. Let's turn on hidden characters to see what's going on. Well, I think I see what's wrong now. When we started formatting the document from this point forward, it made the rest of the page 2 columns. We only wanted the middle part to be 2 columns. We need to add an end section. I'm going to press undo to undo our last change. And this time I'm going to select just the text that I want formatted into 2 columns. And now the paragraphs before and after my selection will remain 1 column. I'm going to go back to the column dialog box. And since we started with selected text, it gives me the option to apply the formatting to just the selected text. I'll put a line in between the columns just for fun. Now that looks better. The title is in a single column. The text is in 2 balanced columns, and the paragraph after the text is back to 1 column. And since I have hidden characters turned on, you can clearly see the section breaks around the 2 column format. The first section break signals the beginning of 2 column formatting, and the second signals the change back to 1 column formatting. Let me end with a warning or demonstration of a problem I ran into that might save you some grief when working with multiple columns. If you want the text balanced across columns, make sure Keep Lines Together is turned off. For example, look what happens if I turn on Keep Lines Together. It looks odd, but it's doing just what I told it to do. It's not allowing text to break across the page, or in this case, across the column. Turning it off gets us back to two nicely balanced columns of text. Well, that's all for video 2. In the next video, we'll explore more advanced features of Microsoft Word.